Hello, I'm Esther Githui-Ewart, and this is Africa 54. Here's what's coming up. The Sudanese army chief is in Qatar for talks with the emir. The visit is General Abdel Fattah Burhan's third international trip since fighting erupted between the Sudanese military and a rival paramilitary force. The U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, announces over $160 million in additional humanitarian assistance for the people of Sudan and neighboring countries. And U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken arrives in Ukraine just hours after the capital city was hit by Russian airstrikes. All this and much more coming up on today's Africa 54. Sudan Army Chief Abdel Fattah al-Burhan is in Doha Thursday, meeting with Qatar's Emir Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani. This is General Burhan's third trip abroad since August 29th and comes one day after he issued a constitutional decree ordering the dissolution of the Rapid Support Forces, according to the governing Sovereign Council. The Sudanese army and the RSF are locked in a battle for control of the country. The meeting comes amid a flurry of similar diplomatic meetings convened in Egypt and South Sudan. Sudan was plunged into chaos almost 5 months ago when long simmering tensions between the military and powerful Rapid Support Forces escalated into open warfare. The United States is slapping sanctions on Abdel Rahim Hamdan Dagalo, a senior commander in Sudan's Rapid Support Forces, and the brother of RSF commander Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo for his connection to alleged human rights abuses committed by the RSF against civilians in Sudan. For more insight, VOA's Paul Ndiho spoke to Edgar Githua, an international relations, security and diplomatic expert at the U.S. International University in Nairobi.
The resolution aspect of the conflict is taking a new angle. The U.S. recently issued sanctions on the deputy leader of the RSF, the Rapid Support Forces. And from where I see it, the U.S. of course claims that he is culpable of human rights abuses. And the truth of the matter is that both sides are culpable of human rights abuses. Now, if the U.S. does not go ahead and also issue sanctions on the senior leadership on Burhan's side, this is going to create a problem in trying to resolve this conflict, because here you have a major world power almost indirectly showing like it has chosen sides. Because to the combatants who are on the ground, they will feel that they were unfairly targeted, that one side is being unfairly targeted. In conflict resolution, we call it this heavy footprint. It's called the heavy international footprint. That heavy international footprint, they need to be very careful on how they try to intervene. So for me, it would have been better if at all the sanctions were issued on both parties and on senior leadership. The very fact that it is Dagalo's younger brother who is being targeted, that is directly targeting Dagalo. It is like firing a warning shot at Dagalo and telling him, we are coming for you next. So I have a feeling the RSF are going to dig in. The RSF are going to become hardliners. They will feel unfairly victimized, and this may complicate the resolution of the conflict in Sudan.
You raise a very interesting angle here, but looking at it from what it is, do you think maybe based on the evidence that they have, they made the right decision?
Both sides are to blame for this conflict. Both sides have committed atrocities. So it may not, I don't want to use the word fair, it may not be prudent or wise to single out one side and remove what we're calling the big stick of sanctions to work, because sometimes sanctions are not effective unless, in my view, you can cut off the arms supplies to Burhan and Dagalo. Sanctions will.
Well, we have a technical issue there, but that was Dr. Edgar Githua, an international relations, security and diplomatic expert at the U.S. International University in Nairobi, speaking to VOA's Paul Ndiho. The U.S. envoy to the United Nations, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, visited Chad's border with Sudan Wednesday and met refugees fleeing ethnic and sexual violence before vowing that Washington would, quote, do everything in our power to prevent and respond to mass atrocities. The United Nations says half of Sudan's 49 million people need help and is appealing for $2.6 billion. So far, it has secured only 26% of this amount. As we've mentioned, Linda Thomas-Greenfield announced new sanctions targeting the deputy leader of Sudan's paramilitary Rapid Support Forces and brother of the RSF commander over human rights abuses.
It has been disappointing to see how little attention this brutal conflict has received from the international community. And when I held the Security Council meeting back in August, one of the briefers said that the world had forgotten the situation in Sudan. And that's a big part of why I am here, to shed light on this grave crisis. When I return to New York, I will share what I learned and what I saw here in Ajimer with all of the members of the Security Council. And I will push other member states and the entire UN system to stand on the right side of history and to urge the Sudanese armed forces and the Rapid Support Forces to put down their weapons immediately and allow the people of Sudan to have peace once and for all. I have to tell you that I was really shaken to my core by some of the horrors that Sudanese people have endured. And I'm determined as ever to share their stories with the world and to mobilize the international community to respond to this dire crisis.
Ambassador Thomas-Greenfield says she is grateful to the government of Chad, local communities and NGO workers who are welcoming these refugees and for all they're doing to support the Sudanese people. At a refugee encampment in eastern Chad, Sudanese children say Janjaweed militias in Darfur are making them orphans. As media and rights organizations continue to report atrocities, Henry Wilkins speaks to the children who are left to fend for themselves in a foreign country with little help.
In the refugee camps of eastern Chad, children make kites from debris they find on the ground. Sticks make a frame, plastic bags for the sail. A refugee said they looked like the planes that dropped bombs over Darfur, the area of Sudan that the children had fled. Childhood and the fallout of war sit shoulder to shoulder in the refugee camp in Ajimer. 12-year-old Insaf Jomar Mohammed says the militias, the Rapid Support Forces linked paramilitary group that the refugees called Janjaweed, brought unimaginable horror to her and her younger siblings.
The Janjaweed killed my parents by shooting them. We were sitting in our house with my father. My mother was in the house too, and they killed both of them. I saw it happen. The Janjaweed didn't say a word. They just killed them.
Mohammed managed to escape Darfur with her aunt and now tries to help take care of her younger siblings, despite her having a disability. The Human Rights Watch organisation describes the paramilitary group's abuses of civilians in Darfur as horrific. In Ajimer, those orphaned by the violence are not difficult to find. Fatma Ahmed Habib says her brother and father went missing in Darfur, but she escaped to Ajimer with her mother and remaining family.
My mother passed away in the hospital shortly after we brought her here. Life has become incredibly challenging for us, especially given that we are left with nothing as they took all our belongings.
Now she must take care of her younger siblings with no parents left to rely on. Yasmin Sharif is Executive Director of Education Cannot Wait, a UN fund for children in humanitarian crises. VOA asked her whether the children in Chad's refugee camps are getting the support they need from the international community.
No, I mean they're getting, basically we do what we can with what we have where we are, but it's far from adequate.
The effect of losing both parents is especially acute.
To be separated from your caregiver at a young age normally creates a very strong separation trauma or sense of abandonment. It's very unhealthy for a child.
Mohammed's experience reflects this.
I miss my parents and I think about them all the time.
The group Global Esham Relief says the trauma and complexity of refugees' orphan situations can lead to chronic stress with lifelong impacts on health. Henry Wilkins, VOA News, Adre, Chad.
Now to a story of overcoming challenges for 24-year-old Nial Deng, whose South Sudanese parents fled the country to neighboring Ethiopia before moving to Kenya's Kakuma refugee camp. And for more on this, I'm joined from Nairobi, Kenya by Nial Deng. He is the founder of Refugee Youth Ambassador. Mr. Deng, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you so much for having me. Good to be here.
Walk us through your early days at the Kakuma refugee camp and how it transformed your life.
Thank you so much. I arrived at Kakuma refugee camp at age 11 after fleeing an armed attack on my village in Ethiopia, where my father settled actually after fleeing the first Sudanese civil war and moved to Ethiopia. Arriving in Kakuma refugee camp, I was devastated. I was frustrated by all the brutal images of violence I saw while fleeing my country. But as a kid, I wanted to be a journalist. So when I was able to go to school in Kakuma refugee camp, I put one thing in my mind, and that was to learn good English, go to the UK and work for BBC. And through that process, I was able to connect with other kids who have also come from different conflict-affected countries across Africa. They live in Kakuma refugee camp, which is a big refugee camp with over 250,000 refugees. And it was, when I was in high school that I started getting involved in community work. I set up different initiatives to help young people in the refugee camp be able to let go of their trauma. Initiative like the Refugee Peace Ambassadors that train young people on the skill that help them become leaders in their community, on the skill that help them have hope again. Initiative like She Leads Kakuma that empower young women and girls in the refugee camp to become leaders in their communities, and being involved in different ways to advocate for refugees globally.
Deng, tell us where you go to school now and how you got to be on the short list of about 50 students for a very highly coveted prize of $100,000 US.
Thank you so much. So in 2021, I was able to get a full scholarship to go to Canada. So I got a full scholarship to Huron University College in London, Ontario, Canada, where I'm now pursuing a bachelor degree in global studies and journalism. And the Global Student Prize, which is run by Shake.org every single year, select one student from across the world that is doing amazing work to support other young people in their communities and to become a leader. And this year I managed to be on the top 50 finalists for the Global Student Prize. And the list was actually brought down to top 10 last week. So I'm now on the top 10 and hoping forward for the best.
Wow, I'm hoping you're going to get it. But let's talk about your two foundations very quickly. Tell us about them and what impact they have on the youth.
Thank you so much. So the first initiative I said about the Refugee Peace Ambassadors, I think first thing that I was really passionate about was trying to create a space for young people to come together and be able to learn a skill that help them, have hope again and be able to dream big again. So with the Refugee Peace Ambassadors, we run workshop on leadership, on peace building. We have mentorship program that we run across the camp. We have social entrepreneurship projects. We have leadership programming. And so far, we've been able to support over 20,000 young people in Kakuma refugee camp that have participated through different programs that we run in the refugee camp. She Leads Kakuma focus a lot on supporting young women and girls in the camp. We've been able to put 500 young women and girls through a mentorship program where we connect them with mentors across the world that support them in becoming leaders in their community and thinking about how they can also become change makers and advocate for issues affecting them.
You know, what surprises me is that you are at the refugee camp at the age of 11. You're only 24 and you've reached this far. There's hope for those at the refugee camps anywhere in the world. Tell me a little more about your recent trip to the Kakuma refugee camp. How are you received and what are you doing there? Did you empower those kids over there?
It was very incredible. Sometime when I'm asked where is home for you, always tell people Kakuma refugee camp because it is where I feel at home, honestly. Being back to the refugee camp was very special. And I think for the many young people there in the refugee camp that are able to show me and welcome me, it's bringing a bit of hope to them. They told themselves that if Nial can make it, if Nial is able to go to college and come back and try to empower us, I can also do it. So when I went back to the refugee camp, I was able to run a one-week mentorship program with She Leads Kakuma, where we bring together 100 young women and girls in the refugee camp. I went to different schools with the UN, talking to kids in those schools, telling them about my story, telling them about the work I do, sharing a skill that I've learned through my journey to also help them, be on the same journey that I've been on, to also help them be on the same path that I've taken. So it was a very great trip. I was welcomed warmly by people in the refugee camp. It's a place that is very, very special to me. And I'm actually going back there again soon before I go back to school.
Nice, nice. Thank you so much, Nial, for that story. Hope it inspires many more. Nial,
thank you so much for having me.
Right, Nial Deng is the founder of Refugee Youth Ambassador. Nigeria's main opposition candidates are appealing a tribunal ruling that affirmed Bola Tinubu's victory in a disputed presidential election in February that they claim was marred by irregularities, according to their lawyers. David Doyle has more.
Nigeria's Presidential Election Tribunal has rejected challenges to Bola Tinubu's victory in February's disputed vote. His opposition rivals, Atiku Abubakar and Peter Obi, who came second and third respectively, had been calling for the election to be cancelled, citing irregularities. But on Wednesday, in judgments that were read out for more than 11 hours, Tinubu's victory was upheld. Obi's petition was described as unmeritorious, Atiku's allegations of voter fraud as so lame. It was, said Vice President Kashim Shettima, a great day for Nigeria.
The Nigerian judiciary had proved itself to be the guardians for justice and fairness against the sirens of deception.
No legal challenge to the outcome of a presidential election has ever succeeded in Nigeria. Nevertheless, Obi's counsel, Livia Zoku, said they would challenge the judgment on appeal.
Let me say this. We have to be very, very careful in this country. If we are not careful, electoral jurisprudence will virtually disappear.
This is a struggle that is not just for our clients.
Atiku's counsel, Chris Uche, described it as a struggle for the constitution, for rule of law, and for democracy. European observers have said Nigeria's elections were marred by problems including operational failures and a lack of transparency. However, the vote, which had a record low turnout of 29%, stirred little sign of a groundswell of popular opposition. Tinubu, who garnered the fewest votes of any president since Nigeria returned to democracy in 1999, has been accepted internationally. In a statement from India, where he is preparing for the G20 summit, Tinubu urged his rivals and their supporters to get behind the government.
That was David Doyle of Reuters reporting. Now, for more insight into Nigeria's election petition ruling, I'm joined from London by Paul Ajimer, a global affairs political analyst and a native of Nigeria. Mr. Ajimer, welcome back to Africa 54.
Thank you, Esther, for having me.
First of all, were you surprised about the outcome of this petition?
One would say yes and no, because the courts in recent past have not given so much hope or confidence to those who are criticizing them for giving very controversial decisions. So for those who didn't have that hope, I think it was, well, we knew it. But for others, the optimists, perhaps it was saying, well, let's see, let's get there, that the proof of the pudding is in the eating.
But now, given the ruling by the first court before they go to the Supreme, is there even any point to go to the Supreme Court at this point? Because the judges there, the panel of 5, said that was frivolous, it's not even worth it, and they should even pay.
Yes, that is the, yeah, of course, some people have gotten redress at the Supreme Court. That is the apex court, and that is the only place where they can go. So I think, and from the opposition, I think they are ready to go the whole hog. But the surprising thing, too, was also the hefty fine that was imposed on the petitioners for filing what the court called frivolous petition. That was surprising because you have an array of senior lawyers that have also won petitions in even in the Supreme Court. But here, they were actually listening to lecture that lasted for more than 12 hours. And then many people, those who didn't have that confidence in the court, are saying, well, we knew it. But others are saying, perhaps, maybe their lordships at the Supreme Court will look at things differently.
Paul, I'm going to make this a twin question. What if the Supreme Court rules in favor of the petitioners or in favor of Tinubu? Would even that legitimize his presidency?
It will have a, act as a boost on because for 100, he was 100 days in office yesterday, and then he was actually taking it quietly, needing that kind of legitimacy So if the Supreme Court upholds this ruling by the appeal court, then it will strengthen him. But if otherwise, well, Nigerians will say, well, perhaps they are following the footsteps of countries like Kenya and Malawi, where the Supreme Courts in those places have also annulled elections and then had a rerun. So it's still wait and see game.
It's up in the air. We will wait and see. Paul, thank you very much for your insight.
Thank you for having me.
Paul Ajimer is a global affairs political analyst and a native of Nigeria. Reporter Timothy Obeso talked to people on the streets of Abuja to get their reaction.
There have been reactions following Wednesday's presidential election petition court verdict. While some citizens praise the court ruling and the judges for their diligence, others are critical. On the streets of the capital, I spoke to a few of them.
The court is the hope of the common man. But what we are seeing, the court is now for the bourgeois, for those who are high and mighty, because it was confusion. You know, constitution that is contradicting itself. Because the moment you have been sworn in, what we have seen, the power of incumbency, the person legitimized himself, put all resources together. He has the coercive apparatus in his arms. Everybody is under him. The judges, everybody.
They are corrupt. They are collecting money which people knows. They are collecting, they are corrupt. The people are not happy. Nigerian people are not happy. There is hunger in the country.
Atiku Abubakar of the People's Democratic Party and Peter Obi of the Labour Party are major opposition seeking to overturn Tinubu's election victory. They accuse the ruling party and the electoral body INEC of committing electoral fraud and manipulating votes, but the court ruled that their claims were not backed by substantial evidence. Meanwhile, Bola Tinubu has welcomed the court judgment and called for all parties to work together. But opposition supporters who protested the court judgment had this to say.
There will be consequences. There will be consequences. It happened in Burkina Faso when the president wanted to change the constitution for a third time. When the young people reacted, they cast away the speaker, burned down the parliament, chased the president away. In Sri Lanka, the same thing. They are thinking that it cannot happen here.
In separate statements, the PDP and Labour Party have rejected the court ruling, saying they will seek redress at the Supreme Court. By law, any appeal must be concluded within 60 days of the date of the tribunal judgment. Timothy Obeso for VOA News, Abuja, Nigeria.
Thanks, Tim. And still to come, Ukraine's capital city, Kyiv, is hit by Russian airstrikes. We'll be right back.
You're watching VOA's Red Carpet. My name is Jackson Vunganyi. Thank you so much for joining us each week right here on Red Carpet. We bring you the latest in
In other news, Gabon's military junta says ousted President Ali Bongo, 64, who has been under house arrest since he was deposed on August 30th, is now free and can travel on a medical trip, according to a spokesman for the Transition Committee. Morocco's Senate president is postponing a historic visit to Israel due to health reasons, according to Israel officials. Inam Mayara's visit was to be aimed at cementing the fledgling ties between the two countries. And a senior UN official says the humanitarian situation has severely deteriorated in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. 8 million people need assistance in North Kivu, South Kivu, and Ituri provinces, and sexual violence has become endemic. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken arrived in Ukraine on a 2-day visit Wednesday as Russian missile strikes ripped through a market in eastern Ukraine, killing at least 17 people. VOA's senior diplomatic correspondent Cindy Sain reports with contributions from congressional correspondent Catherine Gibson.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken said the United States wants to help Ukraine not just survive the full-scale Russian invasion, but to thrive. Blinken announced an additional $1 billion in U.S. aid to Ukraine. He and his Ukrainian counterpart, Dmitry Kuleba, visited a recently reopened McDonald's near the opera in the capital city. Kuleba thanked Blinken for helping get the restaurant reopened, saying it inspires confidence for Ukrainians facing a long, hard war. Blinken had some fries and this to say.
And our friends at McDonald's were very eager to be back in Ukraine, to be back in Kyiv. And we've been saying to each other since they're back, the next time I was in Kyiv, we should get a chance to stop by.
But despite efforts to convey a sense of normalcy, Blinken's visit came on the same day that a Russian strike on a market in East Ukraine killed more than 16 people and wounded more than 24 others, Ukrainian sources said. There were also Russian airstrikes on Kyiv just 3 hours before the top U.S. diplomat arrived by train from Poland. Blinken said the U.S. would support Ukraine through the coming winter and beyond. Asked if he was concerned about sustaining this level of support at home, Blinken was optimistic.
Since I was last here almost exactly 1 year ago, Ukrainian forces have taken back more than 50% of the territory seized by Russian forces since February of 2022. In the ongoing counteroffensive, progress has accelerated in the past few weeks.
But on Capitol Hill, Republican Senator Bill Hagerty told reporters he would like to see more support from U.S. allies on Ukraine.
I'd like to see an announcement coming from all the NATO members saying that they're willing to step up and go alongside us. I just got back from a trip to Europe. We've encouraged our NATO allies to actually step up their game. I'd like to see that happen.
The United States is the single largest donor of military aid to Ukraine. But a number of other countries, including Denmark, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Slovakia, Norway, Finland, the Netherlands, the United Kingdom, and the Czech Republic, are making larger financial contributions to Ukraine relative to the size of their own economies, according to the Kiel Institute. Cindy Sain, VOA News, Washington.
And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, we thank you for joining us today. See you back tomorrow.